Hello, and thank you for joining our Introduction to Tests and Measurements workshop. My name is Kira Litvin. This workshop will introduce students to resources which can be used to locate tests and measurements for dissertation research. It will provide students with techniques to become more effective at searching for this type of information. I am following along with the workshop outline, and you can access all of the library's workshop videos, workshop outlines, as well as the audio transcript for all of the videos. Here under Research Help, simply click on Learn the Library. And on our Learn the Library guide, click on Library Workshop Videos. And you can see here there are separate tabs and pages for the workshop outlines and the workshop transcripts. So the outline for today's workshop, Introduction to Tests and Measures, can be found right here, and just simply click on it to download the Microsoft Word outline. So let's go back to the library's website. So on the front of our workshop outline, our learning objectives for our workshop are to access the Research Process Tests and Measurements page from the library's website, understand the difference between published and unpublished tests, identify and select appropriate resource for finding information on tests and measurements, identify relevant information on tests and measures to determine their appropriateness to their research topic or your research topic, identify ethical and legal considerations involving the use of tests and measures, and learn how to obtain permission to use a test instrument. So on our outline, we do identify in part one that there are two different types of test instruments. They're what's known as published tests, and there's also another type of tests that are considered unpublished or scholarly tests. They're found within the scholarly literature, and they typically are not published commercially. So published tests are those that are commercially available for purchase from a publisher, an organization, or some other type of institution or entity that has created a test that has measurements, scales, tests keys sometimes. Published tests tend to come with established validity, reliability, and norms. They usually come with test manuals and testing protocols, and in many cases, only qualified or professionally trained individuals can purchase copies. So published tests are tests that you would purchase. They are available for purchase. The other type of test is what's known as an unpublished test. They are typically found within the scholarly literature of psychology and have been developed by university researchers and other professionals, government agencies, or nonprofit organizations. Copies of these types of tests or test items may sometimes be found as appendices to or within journal articles, dissertations, books, and other research reports. So these typically tend to be the types of tests that students conducting doctoral research would prefer. We'll have a look today at how we can locate information about both types of tests. So to get started with locating tests within NCU Library, I recommend starting with our Tests and Measurements page. And you can locate that by coming to Research Help and clicking on Research Process. So here on our Research Process page, our Tests and Measurements page is located underneath Resources for Dissertation Research, since that's typically when tests and measures are used in this level of scholarly work. So we're going to go ahead and click on that Tests and Measurements link. And this brings us to our Tests and Measurements page. This page is a great launching off point, and you can actually use this for all of the different databases that we'll discuss today, as well as many other types of resources available to you. So the first part of this page does kind of give you a little bit of introduction, which I'm orally giving to you within this workshop. So it's pretty much the same information. I'd also like to point out on this page here, we do have a link to our Tests and Measurements FAQs, or Frequently Asked Questions. We do get quite a lot of questions about how to locate tests and measures. So many of these questions can be found here in this list. And I definitely want to draw your attention to this, what is a validated test instrument or survey FAQ. We get quite a lot of questions about that. So by clicking on that FAQ, let's go ahead and do that. We can see that there is a brief definition of what a validated test means, or what it means when researchers say that a test is validated. And there's other resources here as well, just defining validation and where you can find more information about what that means. Okay, let's go back to our test and measurements page. Okay, so we're going to skip over this Roadrunner search box, which is this next box here. We're going to come back to this later in our workshop where we're going to discuss that one of the best tools for locating tests and measures is locating them within scholarly articles. So we're going to move on at this point to talk about the library databases available for locating tests and measures, both commercially produced tests and scholarly tests. So this is the box that I'm going to be working in, and there's lots of different tabs in this box. So we're going to use these tabs to locate and look at many of the different databases available, and we're going to do demonstrations in those. Then we'll come back to talk about Roadrunner search and how we can locate scholarly articles, and then we'll also talk about what may be available online and how you can use those as well. So again, I'm following along with our outline, and I'm under part 3 where we're going to talk about specialized databases. So the databases available in this box here, they're not necessarily in order of priority or importance. So I'm going to talk about the ones that I think would probably be your best bet and your best sources for finding tests and measures. We're going to talk about how to locate information as well as immediately downloadable tests that you can purchase for commercially published tests. So ETS test link, we'll go ahead and click on that link. And again, I'm looking just in this little box right here. So the test collection at ETS is a database of more than 25,000 tests and other measurement devices, most of which were created by authors outside of ETS. So they collect this test repository. So this is an excellent place to locate tests that you can purchase and immediately download. Their database contains reviews and abstracts of tests along with detailed information. So let's have a look at how we can search their database. Also keep in mind that this is not a database available exclusively to NCU. It is a freely accessible database. And here we are at the test collection at ETS. So you don't have to locate this through NCU Library. We just make this link available. So this page actually tells you how to search the ETS database. So you can always come back here to this page and review this information, but I'm going to walk you through it. So we're going to go ahead and click on that search the test link database link. And this does open up in a little pop-up window. So just make sure you don't have pop-ups blocked. Just look up in your address bar, either here or in your original address bar to make sure that your pop-ups are not blocked. Here, we're going to look at the basic search tab. So we're on that basic search tab. And again, there's instructions here, which you can read, but I'm just going to demonstrate. So I'm going to search for a published test on reading, maybe even reading comprehension. And if I want to make sure that I'm searching for an exact phrase, I'll put quotation marks around that. Now, one thing that's a little bit odd in this basic search is that there's no button to click to execute your search. So just go ahead and click the Enter key on your keyboard to execute that search. So for reading comprehension, it's told me it's found 1,182 results. Let me just open this up just a little bit bigger. And I can easily scroll down and look at these results, and I can select a result by clicking on the title. So by clicking on the title, now I can see the detailed record of this result. And what it's telling me over here is the title of the test. It has a particular call number. I can see the availability, and this is telling me the publisher information. So it's published by a company called Psychological Assessment Resources. It gives me the address, the telephone number, fax number. Just below it, there is a link to the website for this publisher. I can see these major descriptions, and these are hyperlinks. So if I needed to revise my search or I wanted to look at any one of these major descriptions, I could click on that, and that would lead me to a new search. There's minor descriptions as well. If I look over here on the notes side, on the right side of the screen, then I get an abstract of this test instrument. It tells me about how many, the age level that it's appropriate for, tells me a little bit about how long it takes to administer. It usually gives a number of test items and other types of information. Sometimes it'll also state what type of administration is available, either written or electronic. I don't see that information here. So in any case, this is what I can see and what I can learn when I look at a test record. If we look over at the left side of the screen, we do have more options, as I mentioned, to refine or change our search. So if we want to locate a test that's immediately available to purchase through ETS and to download, then let's go ahead and click on that Advanced Search tab. And here we have more search boxes and more options, and there are instructions below here for how to search for a downloadable test. So this tells us to change the drop-down box to order information and type downloadable in the search box. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we'll change this to order information, and over here we'll type downloadable. And then I will use the second search box to type my search terms again. So reading comprehension as an exact phrase. Now we do have a search button over here on the right-hand side, so I'll go ahead and click that. So this told me that there are 46 records with my search criteria, reading comprehension, that are available for immediate download. So let's go ahead and I'll click on the first one and we can have a look. Again, we have a similar record to what we saw before. Gives us information about the test. We have the abstract over here. Here we do have those general notes that include the time and the approximate items. We have a link right here where it says e-order, and we can go ahead and click to access URL here. This opens up in a new tab in a screen where it gives us the option and the price to purchase, and then we would immediately be able to download this test. So again, that's just one option for how to locate a commercially published test using the database ETS. So we're going to go ahead and close this tab right now, and we'll go back to our tests and measures page. Another excellent source for locating information and high quality scholarly reviews about commercially published tests is called MMY, or Mental Measurements Yearbook with Tests in Print. So the Mental Measurements Yearbook is an annual compendium of published tests that are reviewed by scholars within the field. The test in print aspect is simply an index indicating whether a test is still available in print or published, or whether it's gone out of print. So it actually has two indexes within. So in any case, this is an excellent source for looking at reviews and getting information about commercially published tests. This is a database subscribed within NCU Library. So we're going to go ahead and click on Mental Measurements Yearbook with Tests in Print. And if you are familiar with our Roadrunner search or our EBSCOhost databases, it looks very similar. We're going to be looking at several databases today that will have a very similar interface. So here we are on the basic search screen. We do have an option to click on Advanced Search. If we click there, then we will see that there are some more search options, or they're not necessary for you to use. It is important to keep your terms very broad when you're searching for tests, especially if you are not familiar with a particular test or a specific test name. So in this database, let's go ahead and search for personality. So I'm just searching for that one keyword, personality, and we'll go ahead and click search. So I've located almost 1,500 results related to tests that have some type of measurement or scale related to personality. All of the tests available in the Mental Measurements Yearbook database are available in what's called HTML full text. That means a full text is going to be available here on the screen. So to access a review, I'll just simply click on the title of the test. And now I'm looking at that detailed record screen. So the information up here that I can see is going to tell me all about this test, including the authors, the publication date, publisher information, which I can see here. And in this case, it actually is published by a university. And so sometimes we will see this instance, and other times we may see that it's published by a publisher or commercially, some type of organization or other types of institutions. There's category of the test, purpose of the test, population, scores, how it's administered, the time it takes, and all this other detailed information. As we scroll down the page, now we're seeing that full text review. So if you did want to save this in another format, then you would want to use the save option up here. the top, it does give you an option to download and save it. So again, that just means there's no PDF file here to download. Typically, when we look at reviews here in this database, we may see actually 2 reviews. So I can see that the review starts here. The reviewer, which should be up here at the top, I believe these are the reviewers that I'm looking at here. A professor of educational psychology, the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and a research associate from the Horizon Research Incorporated. So these 2 scholars reviewed this test instrument, and the review then is located here. Sometimes you can even find references available that are cited for the review. And there is a second review here that begins just below. This one is also reviewed by a professor, this time of psychology and human development from Vanderbilt University. So again, in this case, we have 2 reviews. The second one even has more extensive references. And again, keep in mind when we look at Mental Measurements Yearbook, these are reviews of tests and will not contain the full text tests. And in most cases, these tests are available for purchase. Okay, so moving on our outline, now we're going to begin looking at 2 databases that contain scholarly tests. So these are tests that are published within scholarly literature. They're typically not published by commercial publishers, and they're generally available for use for research and teaching purposes. So these are typically the types of tests that doctoral students are looking for because they don't require you to purchase them. They may be, in many cases, very suitable for your research. But again, that's something that you would discuss with your dissertation chair to determine what type of test and instrument is most suitable for your particular dissertation topic. So they are listed with PsycInfo first and then Psyctests second, but I'm going to go ahead and look at Psyctests first. Psyctests is the largest repository for scholarly, or what are known as public domain psychological tests and measures. They are typically available with permissions granted, although we may find that some of them do not have permissions granted and you may need to contact the scholars who produce the tests. So let's go ahead and look at how we can search within this database. When you locate a test within the scholarly literature, so say, for example, you've located a scholarly article that used a test instrument or even developed a test instrument within that research, this would be a great place to come, Psyctests, to search for that test by name. As I've mentioned before, this interface, EBSCOhost, this database looks very similar to what we just looked at for mental measurements, but in this case, we are just searching the Psyctests database, and we can see that up here just above the search box. So again, as I mentioned before, unless you know the specific name of a test or maybe some of the keywords from the test title, otherwise it's important to keep your terms rather broad when you're searching. The more narrow you make your search, the fewer results you're going to find. So let's say, for example, I'm interested in measuring different aspects of leadership. So I'm just going to type in leadership here and go ahead and click search. So I've located almost 1,200 results, 1,194 results with my search for leadership. And you can see that many of these do have that PDF full text available. So that means test items are available to download. I can also limit my search to full text because while most of the resources in Psyctest databases are available in full text, you will occasionally find, depending on the topic, that many are not. So in this case, it did reduce my search down to 633, so almost half. But do keep in mind that if you are looking for the full range or the full availability of tests, you don't want to limit yourself to full text. You may want to keep your options open, look at other tests that may be available, but that you may have to locate outside NCU Library, for example, by contacting scholars who produce the test. So actually, let's have a look at this first one, this first result, and I'll show you an example of where you may need to contact the scholars or the authors of this test. So again, here we're looking at the record of this test. This is called a master test record. And it gives us similar information that we saw from the Mental Measurements Yearbook about this test. It includes the test year. This is rather recent, 2016. We have the authors and their affiliation, address for the corresponding author, and this will be important when you may need to contact the author for permissions. And as we scroll down, we can see the purpose of the test. We can also see a description or an abstract of the test. the format of the test. It's a 10-item measure on a 5-point scale. As we scroll down, this is the important area that we want to look for, and that's those permissions. And in this particular case, and I'll show you a different example in a moment, in this particular case, permissions are not automatically granted. Now, they may be very easy to obtain, but that you will need to contact the corresponding author, and that information is provided up here to find out if you can use this test for research purposes. And I'll also show you in a few minutes when we go back to our test and measures page that we do have information at the bottom of that page with some sample letters that you could use. But just simply you are contacting these authors or this corresponding author to ask for permission to use this for your own dissertation research. And in most cases, this is granted. But do keep in mind that not all faculty or scholars shouldn't get back to students or others who correspond with them. So you may need to consider looking at several tests that you want to use for your research in the case that a scholar may not respond to you. It's not very common. It may be more common if you've located a test that's a lot older. In this case, since it's 2016, it's likely that this scholar is still affiliated with this university and this email address would still be valid. Let's have a look at what we get when we download the test items. So we'll click on this PDF full text file. So again, you're not purchasing a commercially available test that typically comes with test manuals and keys and things like that. What we're looking at here are test items. So this first page is typically what's called a cover page. It tells you about the test and it tells you that this is the full test. So it's not partial or some other version, but it is the full original test items. It tells you what it is. It's an inventory/questionnaire. It's 10 items utilized on a 5-point scale. And as we scroll down, these are the test items. So page 2 does look very slim, and these are the test items that were used in the original construction of this test. Okay, so I just like to point this out because I have gotten questions from students who seem a little surprised when they look at the test items. They expect to get some type of commercially available test that's ready to be distributed, but these are what the items look like. If we go back to that test record, I want to point out when we look at this section that says test child records, this gives us additional information about how this test was developed. If there were tests that were developed before this test and then this one became a revised version or an appendix version or some other type of version of the test, we would see that information here. But what we do see here, which can be very valuable, is the original article that was published for this test. This is the title of the article that I'm highlighting. Below it gives the year and the month that the article was published, and it gives the authors. Generally, these are the same authors for the test itself. This is the journal that it was published in with the volume and the issue. So I point this out because it can also be very valuable to go and have a look at this test, especially if the test is not available immediately to download. So in this case, if I copy the title of this article, I can very easily search for this article by title using the library's Roadrunner search. So if we go back to the library's homepage, here's our Roadrunner search. This is generally what we recommend for locating scholarly articles in the library. I'm going to paste the title of this article here in the search box, and I'm just going to put quotation marks around it, because I want Roadrunner search to know I want to search for this exact title. And I'm going to change this drop-down menu from keyword to title and go ahead and click submit. And this will help me locate this full text article, the article in which this test was originally published here in NCU Library. So I immediately located it right away. This is the information about the article. And I'm going to click on our 360 link to full text to access this full text article. I already checked it before our workshop today, so I know it's available in our Taylor and Francis database. So this is the abstract for that article, and I can download that PDF by clicking on this green button. So we've looked at a test in Psyctests. I do want to point out a couple of other features in this database. We originally used the basic search just to search for our one keyword, but if you do click on advanced search, There are many, many other options available under these search options here. You can always search for a test by the title if you know the exact name of the test. You can search for it by title, or you can search for a keyword within the title. But just keep in mind that that can be very, very limited. So if you don't know, for example, that leadership is in the title, then just do not select a field. We're going to move away from Psyctests, and we're going to look at another related database called Psycinfo. We could choose this database from here by just simply clicking Choose Databases. And this would allow us to select Psycinfo by checking the box next to it and maybe just unchecking Psyctests. That you could search across all of these at the same time. Let me just go back to the Tests and Measures page, and I'll also point out that Psycinfo is available here in this tab, and there's a link right here to Psycinfo. There's another database called Psyctarticles, which only has full text, but Psycinfo contains both citations and full text. Keep in mind that if you locate an article that does not have full text available, we do offer an interlibrary loan service. It's free of charge, and you can request that article free of charge. Unfortunately, though, tests and measurements, such as the items that we've located in the Psyctest database, are not available to be requested through interlibrary loan. So if you've located a test in Psyctest or outside of NCU library and it's not available in full text, meaning those items are not available in a PDF form for you to download, your options would be to contact the scholar or the author that produced that test to see if it's available, or there's a couple of other means that you can look for, but unfortunately we're unable to request those types of instruments through our interlibrary loan service because they're typically not held by libraries, they're held by the scholars who created them. But the Psyctest database is the largest repository for these types of tests. So let's look at Psycinfo for a couple of other things that we can do. So I've already selected that database here. I'm going to remove my leadership option. And in this database, what I'd like to show you is there are a couple of things we can do. We can certainly conduct an advanced search, and we would locate not only scholarly articles in the field of psychology, but we would also locate articles that have used specific tests and measures. What we can do right from the start is click on Advanced Search, and we would have an option to search for a test by name. So using this box right here, we could type the test name, or in fact, I'm just going to look here again because I wanted to use this test and I forgot to copy that. So I'm going to search for the Generalized Opinion Leadership Scale. I'm just going to copy this so it makes it easier for me to search for it. I'm going to go back here to Psycinfo. So I can type the test name right here in this area where it says Tests and Measures under the search options. I can also just type it right up here, Generalized Opinion Leadership Scale. So I'm searching for a test by title, and I can use the field options here, the field codes, all the way towards the bottom. So here I'm going to search, I can do it in two places, just want to point out that they're both available. So I'm searching for articles that have used this test instrument. Again, it's another option. It's another way to expand your research and expand your searching. So if you've already located this test and you want to learn more about it or learn more about how scholars have used it in their research, then using Psycinfo to locate articles that have used a particular study or scale is an excellent way to do that. So let's go ahead and click search. I've only located 3 articles that have used this particular scale. So in this case, I think this very first result is the original article. If I look at the second result here, I can see that this was published a lot earlier. So it's possible that these same authors, it looks like some of the same authors published a version of this test or did research with this scale 2011. In any case, any of these results, even if I had a lot more results, I just simply want to click on the title of this article. And again, looking at that detailed record, if I scroll down to the test and measurement section, I'll get information about the test and scale used within the article. Many times when I look at articles within the Psycinfo database, I can see many, 3, 4 different tests and measures that are used within one article. So let's go back to the results list. I'm just going to do another quick search again in Psyctests for leadership because I wanted to show you, and I realized that I missed that. I wanted to show you the other result here, and we'll use that test as another example in PsycInfo. So I wanted to show you this second result here, this transformational leadership measure, because I realized that when we looked at the first result, it did not include permission. So I wanted to show you what that looks like. So as we scroll down here, here's where we can see that these permissions are granted and available. Permissions may use for research and teaching purposes. And when you download this PDF full text of the test items, you'll see that also on the cover page. So again, this is an example of another test, and you can download and use these test items, and you do not need to request any additional permissions because they are granted here in this record. Now, keep in mind, if you wanted to make any adaptations to this test, that is something you'll need to discuss with your chair about whether that's the right direction for you. And in that case, you will need to obtain permissions to make any adaptations or changes to the original test items. But let's use this test as an example, this transformational leadership measure. It is adapted, but I'm just going to search for these 3 words. Let's go back to PsycInfo, and let's do another search. So I'm just going to replace that search with my new test. Again, this test was published really recently too, so we may not get quite a lot of results, although we did get a lot more. We got 54 results. This test was published in 2016, so I believe that this very first result, again, is also the original article, which this test was published. But let's go ahead and click on that article title. And again, as we scroll down, here's another example of what I was mentioning before. Let me just go ahead and highlight that. So when I look at this test and measure field within this scholarly article, I can see that there are multiple tests that were used. And you can also see that next to these, some of them, there are hyperlinks. And if I click on any of these 3 hyperlinks, this will actually take me to this test within Psyctests. So let me show you that example. So there's a lot of referencing back and forth between these 2 databases, so I definitely recommend using both of them. Let's see if we're interested in this Utrecht Work Engagement Scale. I'll click on that hyperlink DOI number, and this should open that test record. And in this case, this particular test is also available in PDF full text to download. And I can see all the detailed information about this test, including that test child record with the original research article just below. As I scroll down, I also see that permissions are available, may use for research and teaching. So again, this would be the optimal, scenario, is locating a test that has permissions available, it's available in full text for you to download, has original articles, and if we go back, and in this case, for this particular test that we searched for, this transformational leadership measure, we see that there are many, many articles that use this test instrument. So there are a lot of really good examples of research using this particular measure. Okay, so we've looked at most of the specialized databases that I would recommend. These are excellent places to start. Here under our library databases box, we looked at some of them in the tab. There are some additional databases available here in this box. They probably would not be my first choice, so that's why I've pointed out ETS TestLink, Mental Measurements Yearbook, these 2 for commercially published tests, and then PsycInfo and Psyctests for tests within the scholarly literature. Another source for locating information and possible tests would be looking at dissertations. So I do have that ProQuest dissertations and theses link here. This is the largest dissertation database with more than 1 million dissertations from around the world. It also does include NCU dissertations. But we're going to go ahead and do a quick search just to demonstrate how we might be able to locate dissertations that have used a test or measure or instrument. And sometimes those tests or measures may be appended so that test items may be available within the dissertation, or they're certainly going to reference that test within the dissertation. So I'm going to do a search for ethical leadership, and we'll put this in quotation marks So we want to search for it as an exact phrase. And in the box below, we're going to go ahead and add some keywords to locate a test or measure or scale or instrument. We could also look for a questionnaire or survey. So all of these words could be added. This is a technique called nesting, separating all of these words by the word or. It doesn't have to be capitalized. I'm just using it as a visual separator. I just put parentheses around the whole expression just to keep it together. There's a lot of autocomplete coming up, but I'm just going to ignore that. I don't need that. I am going to use the abstract field code for both of my search lines. So ethical leadership and test or measure or scale or instrument or questionnaire or survey. I want to look for these terms within the abstract of the dissertation. I'll go ahead and click search. So again, there isn't necessarily a guarantee that we're going to find, but we did find 100 results of dissertations that return these terms. So let's go ahead and look at the very first one. If I click on that abstract details link, I can see the full abstract. You can see that it's highlighting my terms. So this is a dissertation that is studying ethical leadership perspectives, and it did use a scale or a survey, the ethical leadership scale. I can see that highlighted here. It also used the social desirability scale. This would be a good example of a dissertation that used two different scales, and if I click on that references tab, then I would be able to locate the complete citation for these test instruments and scales. And then I could use Psyctests to see if they're available in full text through the Psyctests database. We have skipped over the scholarly journal articles, and that's part 4 on your outline. So I'm going to go back to that now. I'm also going to return back to our tests and measures page and come back to this box that we skipped towards the top of the page about Roadrunner search. And so we do have this pretty much close to the top of the page because locating tests and measures within scholarly articles is probably one of the best ways, or probably one of the most common ways, to identify tests and measures for a particular topic. If you've already been working towards your literature review and building, looking for articles within your topic area, then you definitely want to identify those articles that use a particular scale and measure, and then that may be your best point to begin your search by looking specifically at those test instruments. So here in this box, we do have an example of a search, and this would be a way that you could set up a search similar to what I just showed you. So let's go ahead and search for these. You can see that different field codes are being used here. So let me show you how I would set that up in Roadrunner search. From the library's homepage, I like to just click on Advanced Search to access Roadrunner search with the multiple search boxes. So we're going to do critical thinking and higher education. And in the last box, we can do scale or instrument, survey. So again, all of the same terms. My first option would be to select the abstract field code for all 3 of these to look for my terms in the abstract of the articles. So let's go ahead and click search and just see how that search goes. Again, it depends obviously on your topic. See, we located about 522 articles that have these terms within the abstract. You can very easily see the abstract in Roadrunner search if you change your page options from the default, which is brief. Click on detailed. This will allow you to see the abstract on the page, and you can very easily see where your terms appear in the abstract and how your terms are related to each other to make sure that the articles are relevant. I also recommend clicking on scholarly peer-reviewed journals. You can further click on full text. However, as I mentioned before, any article that's not available in full text, you can request free of charge through our interlibrary loan service. If you are conducting doctoral research, I don't recommend clicking on full text because then you will be limiting yourself. You'll be seeing all the full range of research available. So again, Roadrunner Search is probably one of the best tools to be able to locate test instruments within scholarly articles. Finally, if we go back to our tests and measures page, and we're just going to go back below our library databases box to look at the internet search. There is an option. You may definitely be able to locate tests and measures or information about them by conducting a Google search. So here we have a screenshot. We'll go ahead and search for that Beck depression inventory just using Google. So I'll search as we saw in the screenshot, Beck depression inventory. I didn't put quotation marks around it, but I certainly could. You can see here that we got all different kinds of results. We get first results from Google Scholar, which we can see up here. We have other results, Wikipedia, APA, lots of other results if we scroll down the page. We do see one result here that does show that this inventory is available in PDF. If we go ahead and click on it, this actually will show us all of the test items, and it does look like it's in a nicely formatted page in order to be able to distribute to test participants. However, keep in mind that there is nothing indicating that there are permissions to use this test instrument. Just because somebody has published it and put it on the internet doesn't necessarily mean that the authors authorized this. So you definitely would need to contact the authors. You can certainly search for Beck's depression inventory in Psyctests to find out who published this test, who the scholars are, where the original article in which this test was published and how it was developed. But I would strongly recommend contacting those scholars for permission, or even locating the test items within Psyctests first before using something that you found published online. If we go back to our tests and measurements page and we scroll down, in our last box where it says selected resources, we have quite a number of different resources available, including journals that may publish instruments, ebooks, open access. These are freely available websites that may publish and make available test instruments. And then the sample permission letters, which I've mentioned before. We have 4 links here. These are just examples of possible letters. You may use some of this text in order to request information from scholars. Finally, there's a tab here for additional tutorials from some other libraries. And under the Additional Resources tab, I really recommend viewing the Psyctests video available from the vendor EBSCOhost. This is an excellent video that really does go into more detail than what I've demonstrated here on how to locate and learn a little bit more about permissions and other factors related to tests available in Psyctests. So at this point, I've covered most of the information on the outline. It looks like we have explored all the different resources available in the library. There's a lot more resources that you can explore by coming back here to the selected resources, journals, and ebooks, and open access. Please let me know if you have any other questions. And I want to thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you.